Hello, hello, and welcome to episode 32 of Trails in the Pod. I'm Colin. That's Kevin.
This manga did what two games could not, what God himself and a host of angels could not.
And what's that, Kevin?
It changed my opinion on Loewe.
All right, well, we have to get into that, but before we do that, Kevin, we're back. We've been gone for a while now.
We've been gone about a month or so. It feels a lot longer for us because we recorded a number of episodes in a row to have a bit of a buffer over the holidays. We have not recorded since mid-December. New year, new us.
Before we start diving into this manga, I want to have a shout out to the guy who recommended this manga to us. In the previous episode, the sharp-eared observer might remember that we called this man Chua. That's because, being English speakers, we saw his name and assumed that that's how it was pronounced. He then immediately got on Twitter and said, "The way that you pronounce my name is hilarious. I have never heard anybody say my name that way, ever." And so when I asked him, "How do I do it?" he said, "I cannot explain it to you in English. You can call me Take Lee." Let's talk about the manga, because I think we both had pretty positive impressions of it. I just finished reading through it right now for the second time, and you read it the first time today.
I'm so thankful, being completely serious, this manga was recommended. It was a great piece of storytelling. I loved it.
Yeah, like I did not think that they would be able to pull it off, to be honest with you. So the concept of this manga, the name will be in the title of the podcast, is that it tells the story of Trails in the Sky, FC and SC, through the lens of Loewe. Right, this is Loewe's story. And to be honest, I didn't think that there was really going to be enough there to fill up 3 volumes, but they made it work.
They made it work so much. I'm sure there's places both you and I could bring up and say, boy, I wish we got more on this or that.
Yeah.
And he is an important character, to be sure, but he is a side character. He does not have much screen time in the games itself, but they give him a complete story from beginning to end here. It's good.
Yeah. It shows Loewe actually having an arc. We see how he gets to where he begins in the games, which is kind of in this darkness, dedicated to Ouroboros. We get the sense that there's some kind of moral conflict within him, but it leads people like Kevin to say, well, why doesn't he just leave Ouroboros? And this kind of shows us why he sticks with them.
It does. But first, let's go a bit broader and ask, okay, so there's a manga that's adapting or creating stories from the first 2 Kiseki games. Why Loewe? Why him? Why not, say, someone from the Scooby Gang? Or why not someone else from Ouroboros? What does Loewe specifically offer us?
Sure. So I'm going to give you credit for this idea because I didn't think about it, but I'm just going to say it, is that Loewe dies in SC, so he gives us naturally a complete narrative to go with. So I think that's one thing, but what I think that is probably a bit more relevant is that Loewe has the coolness and mysterious factor that none of the other characters so far really have. I mean, he's called the Blade Lord, right? He looks awesome. He's very powerful. He's flying a dragon. He's intimately linked to the events that happen in SC. So it's natural that we'd want to learn more about him. If you compare it to the other Ouroboros members, the only one who has the same amount of mystery is Campanella. And I think that you'd have to spoil quite a lot in order to explain Campanella, to the point where, as fans, we still don't really know that much about Campanella. And I'm talking about, like, current fans, like me, don't know much about Campanella. So it'd be hard to make a manga on that. And on some other characters that might be developed, or they're going to be developed later. So it'd be kind of tough to write a manga about them at this point in time.
So that is really interesting to know about Campanella vis-a-vis where the Kiseki series is in the current day?
I can tell you precisely one fact about Campanella.
The name is Campanella. Boom.
I'm not even sure that's a fact, honestly. Yeah, he's a very mysterious character. There are some interesting fan theories that we will talk about once we get farther in, I think. But yeah, we don't know much about him.
So you said Loewe is mysterious,
Would
Colin, and that's one of the reasons
Yeah.
why not do a manga about him. Is making him more known, less mysterious, does that hinder or hurt his character, the reception, whatever you want to call it? Does knowing more, does peeling back the curtain, does that improve his character or worsen it?
I think it improves it. And the reason why is because the plot in SC is never driven by you saying, oh my god, who's this guy? We need to find out more. There's a little bit of that in FC, a very little bit of, but not in SC. By the beginning of SC, you already know that he's connected to Joshua. You learn more when he pops up, but his mystery is a reason for you to want to play more, but it's not a driving force of the plot, which means that when you replay it, by knowing what you know about his character already, you're able to fill in some blanks while you're playing it, and it makes you happy. It makes you understand things a bit more. It's not like it's spoiling anything. It's not spoiling any surprises. So now that we have even more context, especially for fans who have played a little bit later on, there's one character in particular that Loewe is linked to in the manga that we haven't even seen yet in the games, Arianrhod. And that is really cool, right? That is... It contributes to creating a more cohesive world because more characters that we know about know each other and interact with each other and impact each other.
So where do we want to begin our discussion of the manga?
Well, I think it might be best to talk about this more in like general impressions and specific moments rather than trying to hit it plot by plot, because quite frankly, we've already done plot by going through the games. But why don't we start, ironically enough, at the beginning with the sack of Hamel, because that's a pretty graphic scene to go right off the gate.
I had a couple initial thoughts I'll just spew out, and then we can discuss or leave by the wayside as needed. One, I was a bit surprised at the kid brother, the young aspects of Joshua. It was almost a caricature, I think. My impression from hearing Joshua, from hearing Loewe in the games, was he was young, but not this, I don't know, 4, 5, maybe 6-year-old. Or maybe he was, but the way it was told in the game did not seem so young, or I'm not sure what the words I want are.
But in the games, we never saw him as a kid. We were just told that he was one.
Okay, and he was 10 when he left the Ouroboros to go to the Bright family. He spent an unspecified time with the society before that. I guess it's not a complaint, it was just a bit of a surprise, almost a shock to see Joshua so careless, in a good way, so energetic, so carefree, I should say, without the weight.
Yeah. Like a kid.
Like a kid.
But that, without a weight, comes to a screeching halt.
We see the sack of Hamel. We see the soldier try to force himself on Kieran. I was surprised a bit at how, I don't want to say graphic, or what they were willing to show made the intentions very clear.
Yeah.
It was not gratuitous. It was not fan service. In fact, as a whole, there is hardly any, if none, fan service in the manga, in the 3 volumes, which I quite appreciated.
Yeah, the attempted rape scene of Karen I thought was really powerful, because in the games what we're told this through Loewe and Joshua's perspective, right? And the game doesn't depict the episode pictorially that much at all. We're concentrating more on Joshua witnessing an event happening and being unable to understand what was happening
Yes.
because he was a kid. But he just had this feeling that something was wrong, and then he finds himself shooting the guy attacking his sister. But in the manga, we see the Jaeger pin Karen to the ground, lay on top of her, start ripping open her blouse, revealing her undergarments, even start working on those. And it's in this moment where we don't get quite to nudity, but we do get, like, you see the outline of the breast, right? It's almost naked. You get the suggestiveness that there is stuff going on, but it's not done in an erotic way. It's done in a very brutal way to show how Karen is being violated, how her safety is in question, and the brutality of the scene that you're witnessing. I can't think of a better way that they could have done it.
It was respectful. It was responsible how they depicted the scene.
One thing that you pointed out to me that I want to pick up on, though, is that there was a bit of ambiguity in the games that Joshua accidentally killed Karen. It's not stated that he accidentally did, but it's ambiguous enough that you can read the sentence that way. In the manga, definitely not the case. In the manga, it was definitely the attempted rapist who killed her. Plain and simple. What do you think about that change?
So I'm just curious, is this something that Colin and I read into where there was not ambiguity in the game? But we both came to that conclusion independently, so maybe not. On the other hand, think about this, Colin. This is a graphic medium. I mean, in the most literal sense, it's a visual medium. How could they do the ambiguity with a image format? It would be much tougher than the verbal, written recollection that we get in the games. So that might be it.
I disagree. I think they could have done it the way they did it in the games because it's done pictorially in the games. What you would have to do is show Joshua holding the gun and then see Karen go over to hug him, be like, I got you, I'm all right, everything's going to be okay. And then you just see Karen's eyes go wide as she dies. And then that opens the ambiguity of, did Joshua accidentally shoot her, or did somebody else stab her in the back? Right? You could have like even a close-up on the back that there's a wound there. And then maybe later you reveal why that is there. You know, maybe the attempted rapist is still alive and up and kicking, as he was in this. Or you can continue to leave that ambiguous.
Maybe it was the manga artist taking pity on Joshua. He's had enough happen. He will do enough bad things without adding this maybe trauma, this burden to his already fragile, in tatters psyche.
Sure, maybe. But I'm curious as to know what you think is better.
I like the ambiguity that this may have been the start of Joshua's unraveling, that it was not just the destruction of Hamel, the death of Kieran, but maybe, and he will himself never know for certain, maybe he's the one who did it. Maybe she would have died from the wounds she already had. Maybe they would have died if there was 3 of them. Maybe not. It's that uncertainty that maybe it all would have been up for the better.
Yeah, I kind of like having it being clear cut, because I've often wondered if Joshua thinks that he killed Karen, why do we never see him ruminate on that when he gets his memory back? He clearly has a lot of regret for the things that he's done, but he never shows regret for himself killing Karen. And one would think that he would if he thought that he did.
Yeah, that's interesting. Is it the game importing ambiguity where Joshua does not feel the same?
Or maybe the Joshua's reaction is a key to how we should be taking that line. Because the other thing that we don't know is it actually ambiguous in Japanese? We're playing the English localization by Xseed. As far as I can tell from community reaction, the Xseed localizations are very well done, but sometimes take a little bit of liberty in order to make things it's more of a literary translation than a literal translation. At least as far as I know, but I don't know because I don't know Japanese, and I can't test. But I would be curious to know if that ambiguity is actually there, or if it's created by the localizers.
So it's very possible we have just spent 5 minutes talking and analyzing and discussing an issue that does not exist.
Well, I don't know if it doesn't exist, because most people in English are going to be playing the XC translation, not the Japanese script. And something that I feel very strongly about is that in cases like these, it's important to, yes, you consider the context of the original, and my instinct is to want to get as close to the original as possible. But the English localization is its own thing. It's its own entity based off of the original, but it is not the original. And that is the experience that we had. We did not have the experience of the original. Sometimes comparing to the original can help bring clarity to things, or it can reveal little bits and odds that are interesting. But at the end of the day, we're playing the localization. That's what we're experiencing.
Exactly. We get some very interesting new information. Like you wrote down, Campanella was the one who recruited Loewe for the society.
Yeah. And Campanella, at least as far as we can see, knows what happened, like, immediately. And Campanella is an interesting guy. He always seems to know what's going on. He's always at the right place at the right time. He was there to recruit Joshua and Loewe. And if we remember anything from the games, we know that Loewe is Enforcer number 0, the observer of the Grandmaster. He is constantly in communication with the Grandmaster. We even see a little bit of that in the manga, which would imply that the Grandmaster probably had a hand in picking Loewe for his role as an enforcer. Same with Joshua, for that matter.
And how does Campanella get Joshua to join the society? What argument does he use? What persuasion does he employ?
Well, he doesn't convince Joshua at all, but he does work on Loewe, and the way that he does it, what I find fascinating about this, though, is that he reveals to Loewe the existence of the aureole from the beginning. Like, all the stuff that we had to learn, he's like, look, people are weak. This is the extremities that we can have when people just give in to their selfish desires. It's on the Liber arc. Here's a scene from it. You can watch it. You can see the true nature of people. Help us find it so that we can remind this world of its weakness. And to be honest, that line of reasoning still doesn't make sense to me. I don't understand how finding the aureole is supposed to reveal the deception of the world to people in any way that's constructive. But this little vignette does show me how Loewe arrives at that conclusion and what it's playing off of. And all of a sudden, his personal reason, even if I don't understand it or agree with it, becomes a lot more compelling, because I see how he's using that reason as a way to manage the grief and trauma that he had experienced.
Oh, yes. And you are correct, Colin. It does not make sense, because it does not. I would argue Campanella, knowing that Loewe is psychologically destroyed, he's traumatized, what can go wrong in his life has gone wrong. He does not need to make an argument for the ages to get him in. All he really has to do, then, is to get Loewe on the same page, and it doesn't hold up because it's not meant to be scrutinized by someone in command of the faculties. It sounds, at first glance, at first hearing, impressive, and there's stuff behind it, and that's enough for Loewe given the state he's in. He is looking for a life raft, and he'll grab the first one that comes his way.
And on top of that, Ouroboros offers a sense of community, which we've seen like with the small little family unit that he's made with Joshua and Ren.
They have Taco Tuesdays.
Sure, they have Taco Tuesday.
Stir Friday.
I never heard of that concept. I mostly spend my Fridays going to the graduate student bar and staying up until 1 a.m. But I think that stir fries are probably healthier for me. You wrote a note here about the Grandmaster. Why don't we transition to that?
I'm not sure if this was literal depictions or if it was metaphorical or symbolic, but it's referred to as a she. We don't see her as a person. We see Arianrhod, I think it is, go up to her and talk to her, but she is like in a ball of light. I'm not sure, is that to preserve her identity? Is it someone that we've met or will meet? Or Is she more than human? Is she not human? How are we meant to take away this, Colin?
So there are some things here that up until a few years ago, like 2 years ago, I wouldn't have felt comfortable talking about because that would verge on spoiler territory. However, my viewpoint on spoilers is that if something is available in marketing, it is typically not seen as a spoiler. And the cover of Hajimari no Kiseki, Trails into Reverie, has the Grandmaster on the cover, which reveals to you that, yes, she is a woman. And at least in that form, she is not somebody that we have met yet. That being said, one of the lead writers of the series has said that we have met her before. And he said that years ago. So I don't know what's going on with that. And that's something that people can look up and see on their own. I know that people on our Twitch stream want me to install the Japanese voice mods into Trails the Third, which I will do. And if you do that, then there is one particular scene that confirms that the Grandmaster is a woman that you don't get if you are an English speaker, because you don't hear that voice patch. But that is all I'm going to say about that, because already that is verging on spoiler territory. So we're going to move away from that. What did you think of Arianrhod? Because this is the first time that we've seen her.
Didn't pay much attention. She seemed fine-ish, less homicidal, psychologically unstable than most of the enforcers under Weissman's control, and I wonder if that was a theme that he got, if she cultivates a different breed of people, because she is also an Anguisse, I believe.
Yeah. The way that I read the manga, she said something like, I shall be the seventh Anguisse. So I'm wondering if we had just caught her at a moment of transition in which she became the Anguisse. I'm not sure about that.
Okay. But in general, she didn't have that much screen time, page time, I should say, and overall seemed fine. I would be more willing to sleep in a room with her than, say, literally anyone else that's under Weissman's control.
Yeah. I think I tend to agree with you. The reason why I bring Arianrhod up, and I mentioned it before earlier in the podcast, is that as we continue on in the series, we're going to be seeing a lot more of her. So I just wanted to flag her as a character to pay attention to.
There's one thing that the manga shows that's also in the games about Weissman that I just do not like at all.
Okay.
Weissman has these convoluted, multi-stage, multi-step plans. Everything falling in line like dominoes or chess. He can see the board, knows what's going to happen 10 moves ahead, and plans and plots and acts accordingly. That's not how any of this happens. Any plan more than 3 complicated steps isn't a plan, it's a wish list. It's what people think cunning and schemers are like, but that is not what they are like. That's not a good depiction of a plotter or a schemer or what the concept of cunning is at all.
Maybe I'm just remembering incorrectly. I know what you're talking about if you've moved on to talk about Volume 2. In Volume 1, I don't really remember that being a factor.
We see it. He sent Joshua to Cassius, trying to kill him, with the end goal of Cassius adopting Joshua into his household.
Oh, yeah, quite. I don't have much of a problem with that one in particular, because that's really 1 or 2 steps. That's not a convoluted thing. Some of his other plots, like the entirety of the gospel plan, in which I don't even mind planning things out and being the mastermind. What I get mad at is when parts of that plan are disrupted by the actions of an outside force, say our heroes, and the guys just go, that doesn't impact the plan at all. Because, bitch, yes, it does. It does change your plan. And every time a villain says that doesn't impact the plan, I know that we're going to win. Because guess what? We did change the plan.
So why have it as part of the plan, then, if its success or failure seem equally irrelevant to the ultimate action?
Precisely. And, doing this once or twice, I don't find that to be a bad thing, but it is such a trope. And I think that it would make more interesting villains for them to say, shit, this didn't go as according to plan. We need to change what we're doing in order to, compensate for this failure. That's way more realistic and engaging.
Yeah, we're not saying either of us long term plans and strategies are bad or unrealistic. Quite the opposite. But I think it's most realistic and most enjoyable to watch, play, experience. They have goals, they act, and they react as the situation is their control, limited or not, permits. Sometimes it will be years in the making. Other times they have to react to unexpected events that threaten to derail or disrupt entirely, and that's good. Cunning is not plotting 12 moves ahead. Cunning is taking stock of a new situation and making the right choice to advance your plans without time for contemplation and in the heat of the moment.
To be more positive on the Weissman front, because I agree with what you say here. You know, a successful strategist is not thinking 30 steps ahead without taking into contingency plans and being aware that things change. However, what I did find very interesting was seeing how much of an active role Weissman had in creating the coup attempt.
Yes.
First, by deciding to install Loewe as Lawrence Belgar. It's never really revealed how he got there. We just kind of assume that it's an Ouroboros thing directed by Weissman. Here we see that it's actually happening. And then we also see how Loewe is able to convince Richard, not very difficult either, but is able to convince Richard that they share the common goal of protecting Liberl and looking, basically being Liberl first and stuff like that. And the way that Loewe does that is by saying nothing, by just agreeing and being competent at his job. And Richard reads into that what he wants to read into that. And Loewe is able to exploit that weakness by introducing to Richard the Gospel Project, and then Weissman comes in at that moment under the guise of Alba to finish the job and to really exploit Richard's desire for national security to get this project jump started. And I found that very interesting.
It's not a 30-step plan. It's let's put Loewe in a spot where he could be of use. They have a goal. Let's see what comes of it. And it seems that Weissman acts, changes or adapts as the situation calls when he sees either for himself or through Loewe that Colonel Richard is malleable and can be corrupted for the end goal. I thought it was very well done.
This is also, the second volume is where we really start to see some of our people, right? Estelle, Joshua, Olivier, Shara. To be honest, I kind of glazed over these parts. I mean, I read them and I enjoyed them, but reading a story about Loewe, I'm looking for the Loewe moments. I'm looking for the stuff that's revealing what we didn't already know. And these parts we already knew, but I want to know what your thoughts on them were.
Well, graphically, I liked a lot of the depictions, how they drew Estelle, Tita standing up to Loewe over Agate, seeing them, I don't want to say brought to life, but in a different format. I thought artistically, here and elsewhere, the manga did quite a good job. But I do think you are quite right about a bit glazing over. How did it change the way we understand the characters or their actions? It really didn't. We got a surplus of explanation and motivations, playing the games. The new stuff is about Loewe.
And I do think that the manga kind of assumes that you've played the games. Now, I don't think that it's as incomprehensible if you haven't than, say, compared to the OVA. Right? This does have a full narrative that you can understand. Things are explained most of the time in a way that you couldn't take a grasp on it. But it does kind of assume that you know a lot of the significance of things that have happened in a way that it doesn't bother trying to explain that.
I agree. I'll go so far as to say that this is not that comprehensible, I think, if you have not played the games. Like Estelle, she is not named directly or that much. Her importance really has to be filled in the blanks by the reader who knows what happened in the first two games. If you just had the manga, you wouldn't quite get it.
I think that you would at least get that this is somebody who Joshua finds very important, whom he's left, and that they have a loving relationship just from the dialogue. Obviously, you wouldn't understand how it got there. You also, you would know that they grew up together because we see Joshua getting taken in by Cassius, and we know that Estelle is Cassius's daughter in the context of the manga. That's brought up a couple of times. A place where I do think that you're right, though, is the manga nowhere explains that the winner of the martial arts tournament will be invited to see all of the notables of the kingdom for dinner. It just assumes that you know that. If you don't know that, you have no idea why Loewe has to throw the fight in the ring, or why they even talk about that being a possibility. You have had to have experienced that side of the story first in order for that story segment to make sense.
Quite.
Something that I found interesting in Volume 2 was that it revealed that Estelle getting her ass kicked by Loewe in front of the Queen is canon. So, Kevin, you made the right play.
I did. Trying to Kevin up the fight was what the developers wanted.
Precisely.
In general, I thought Volume 2 was good. It hewed quite closely, I thought, to the events of the games. Or at least it wasn't as much new scenes with Loewe like we got in Volume 1. That's not good or bad, but there's not that much to talk about independent with Loewe. A lot is what we've talked about for hours upon hours over the past 6-7 months.
So then let's move on to Volume 3, which I personally think kinda has the same facets, in which it's mostly a retelling of stuff that we've already seen. It's retelling it from Loewe's perspective, and so we see a bit more of his introspection and his emotional journey through realizing he has to fight Joshua and being glad that Joshua has beaten him, and even having an esteem for Estelle, I found to be pretty interesting, as well as showing his acceptance of his relationship with Karen.
With Estelle, we get a title drop, what I assume has to be an explanation. I don't know if it's official, but one that I think is plausible for Sora no Kiseki, Trails in the Sky.
Yeah. See, you have the panel here where Estelle says, I need to know all the trails he left so I can pursue him. And then later it talks about the sky. Yes, it reminds me of a clear blue sky, talking about Estelle's eyes and clearness of vision. And I do think that it's possible that that's it's definitely a tie-in to the title of the series. I mean, that is obvious. We didn't get anything quite as close to a title drop in the localization. Now, we should inform our viewers that this manga has never been officially translated. What we read was a scanlation by a community member. I don't remember the person's name, unfortunately. Let me see if I can get to it. A guy named Soshi is the guy who did all three of these. Scanlations tend to be more literal in my experience, because they're just looking to get, here's what the Japanese is, plop it into comprehensible English, and ship it out the door, which is an approach that I very much appreciate. But in this case, it might mean that if references to Sora no Kiseki were in the Sora no Kiseki games, Exceed might have decided not to translate it that way in order to keep things from being hokey, whereas the Japanese original would have no problems with that.
If so, and I have no idea if this was the case, but if there were references or such to Sora no Kiseki, they should have been somehow integrated into the localization. I want to know what moments is the game forcefully telling us, with the title, here is distillation, or here are the themes, or here is why the game is called what it is called.
Yeah. That's a good point. And I'll tell you something else. Like looking into the Crossbell games, Trails from Zero and Trails into Azure, there's a reason why those games are called that way. It's very obvious by the time that you finish Azure why that is the case. To the point where Nisa is keeping the Trails from Zero, Trails into Azure monikers instead of just saying Trails of Zero, Trails of Azure. In the same way that, unlike when, it's Trails in the Sky, you could have translated them all as Trails of the Sky, Trails of Cold Steel, whereas they allowed for variation in the English renditions of Zero and Azure. With Cold Steel, I have no idea why the fuck it's called Cold Steel. Maybe Nisa just decided that they're going to ignore those references. Maybe they don't exist. I have no idea. The more I talk about this, the more I think we should learn fucking Japanese.
I think it's called Cold Steel because I bet 2, 3, and 4 feature invasion by the elves, the fair folk, the She, and it is well known that cold iron and cold steel repel fairies.
I'm just going to leave this at I can neither confirm nor deny. And you should write that down as a prediction. We'll come back in like 3 years and see how accurate you were. Speaking of title drops, though, something that we skipped over is that at the end of Volume 2, there's an extra chapter that's going over, it's Joshua, Karen, and Loewe looking at the stars. And they make a thing where, we just have to follow the same star and we'll find each other. And Loewe's always broody and looking out at the window, and it's basically trying to find that star. And it's at that moment that it's revealed that that is what the song Whereabouts of Light is about. And it holds special significance for Loewe as well. We knew that it held significance for Josh, though we never really quite knew why, other than Karen used to play it. But now there's a whole thematic reason why it's important, and it also binds Loewe and Joshua together.
Follow the star on Orion's... Follow the star for the whereabouts of light.
Is Follow the Star on Orion's Belt a reference to something?
Men in Black.
Man, that's a deep cut. I haven't seen that movie in years.
It's good. This is the glue that reconnects and allows them, though the three who have been scattered, to come back together.
Yeah.
Nothing says that they cannot do this when they die. That even though Karen died before her time, that Loewe had what happened to him happen, that Joshua had his own path, that when their time has ended, that they cannot follow the star and reunite together. It's hopeful.
And I think that that's kind of a good way to encapsulate Loewe's story, like his story arc, right? He starts off with hope. He wants to be a bracer, he has this great life ahead of him, and then he hits the absolute pit of despair. And then throughout the course of the rest of his life, it's slowly regaining bits of his humanity again until he's able to have hope again by witnessing Karen in the afterlife.
Until he can die. And I'm being serious here. That with what happened to him, his psyche, what he's done, he was going to die young, within a short period of time. His ending was not full redemption, was not living to old age, dying in bed. It was so much of what made life worth living has been taken from me. I have corroded through coercion what little has been left. And is it possible for me to die as myself? He was able to die as Loewe before the sack of Hamel, and that was the best possible ending, I think.
I never thought of it in those terms, though I do think that you're right. To me, the way that I viewed this as Loewe's entire life revolves around Karen. And he's able to go forward because of this ill-conceived mission to show the world they're being deceived as a way to make sense of Karen's death. And part of the reason why he was so confused at Karen's death is at the end she appeared happy. At the end she appeared fulfilled. And he could never understand that. And it's only at the moment of his death when he saw Joshua looking up at him and he realized that he managed to protect Joshua. That's when Karen's death made sense to him. And that's what he needed.
She died helping to protect others. She died knowing Joshua was going to be safe.
Yeah, and so did Loewe. Except that Joshua almost died from jumping off of a pillar. But Loewe didn't know that was going to happen.
No, and they both died knowing that their actions helped save another person, that there was meaning in their death.
Yeah, I don't think it's just died saving another person. I think it's died saving Joshua, somebody that they cared about, that they loved very much. And I think that it's important that it's the same person that they saved. It's not that Loewe died to save Ren or somebody else that he cared about. He died to save the same person that Karen saved. Overall, Kevin, you opened this episode, this cold open as you do, because again, I never know what you're going to say at the beginning of episodes. You don't share that ahead of time. Sometimes I think that you figure that out as soon as you open your mouth. And you started off by saying that your opinion of Loewe had changed. So why don't you walk us through that process? How did it change? And what made this manga convincing enough that you could do that?
So we all know I did not like Loewe because of what I interpreted as redemption. He was forgiven for all the shit he did, such as the mall. But let's not get into that again.
Oh, by the way, the mall is not crushed in this manga adaptation. Did you notice that?
I did. Yes, I did.
It's like the one part where they break continuity.
Like I said, it was never about Loewe getting away with this, getting scot-free. It was about him being able to die well. And
sure,
it showed an arc, and not all arcs are positive. An arc is change. It's growth. Sometimes that's negative growth. And for a lot of the manga, this was negative compared to where he was in the beginning. And we saw him descend. And we saw him go back up to ascend, but not in a way that made it so the things he did were forgiven. The slate was not wiped clean. He was able to die with a smile on his face, and that's it. It was powerful.
It's a really powerful manga. I remember that when I read through it the first time, I'm pretty sure I cried near the end of it. Like I could feel to some extent what Loewe was feeling in those moments. It was very evocative. To me, why I think that this manga was successful is because Loewe suffers a little bit from moody villain syndrome. By this, I mean he can be a little bit edgelordy at times. And I don't mean this to say that he is an edgelord. He has no...
Excuse you, Blade Lord. His title is Blade Lord.
Okay, for doing that, we should be calling him Leadheart the entire time. What I mean is, he is one of those people that can say, I don't care. I'm immune to all emotion. Darkness has taken over my life, and that's who I am. And yes, you can see in some other moments that's not quite true. In the games, he saves kids at the orphanage from being set on fire. He directs Ragnar to not kill people needlessly. Like he's clearly there's still like a good guy under there. But what you see is his external display of being an asshole, even when he's not being an asshole. What this manga does is put Loewe's humanity first and foremost, and it helps us conceive of him as a real person with real feelings and real dynamism that you need in order to have a truly compelling character. So for that reason and that reason alone, I think this was an excellent adaptation.
What's kind of weird is, or maybe it's not, but we didn't see the orphanage.
Yeah, we didn't at all.
Arson scene?
We should have, I think. It would have been really interesting to see why he chose to save the kids there, how we got that assignment. Because, I mean, we see a little bit of how Ouroboros is cooperating with Richard, but obviously they had to be cooperating with the mayor of Rouen as well, right? And we know from other events and the timeline that is part of his cooperation with Richard, but it would have been cool to see how the intelligence division gets to that conclusion, how Loewe plays a part. Why does Loewe go back and see the play? You know, watching Joshua and Estelle from the rafters. That would have been a great scene to explore in this manga, and it would have been incredibly fitting for this manga. So maybe it's because there was cross-dressing? I don't know. That's the only reason I could think of why they didn't include it. Which is a stupid reason, by the way.
It would have done so much to get a better sense of Loewe. And it would not have been about Joshua and Estelle. It would have been the focus, the spotlight on Loewe.
Yeah. I mean, let's not forget, there was a moment in which Joshua runs away to the old school house in the back because he thinks that he saw Loewe. He doesn't put it in those terms because he's not cognizant of that, but he knows that there's a silver-haired man, and he's looking for that. And we don't see why Loewe went to the back. We don't see anything like that. And I've always wondered why that was the case.
Yeah, I don't know why we didn't get to see that. We should have. We should have seen Loewe waiting for Joshua at the old schoolhouse, wondering.
Yeah, like, what was the motivation for that? Was he trying to bait Joshua out to see if he could remember him, test his combat skills? Was it a distraction while something else was happening? Also, then what drives him to decide to watch? Like, it would have been an amazing way to see him, like, witness Joshua and Estelle for the first time. And what thoughts are going through his mind? You know, is he's like, this is Joshua with a real family. Because he does have thoughts like that in the manga, where he wants Joshua to get away from Ouroboros and live a normal life. We've seen him witness Joshua have that. Why is that not here?
If there was a major failing of the manga, it was in this moment.
Yes. I think it's to the manga's credit that the major failing is that it didn't cover a scene that we wanted them to cover. What's here is fantastic. What's here is great.
Yeah, I mean, I don't have that much more to say. I feel like we said what we intended to, and I don't know, it's that feeling that you get when you see something or experience or read something profound, and that was what I thought with this manga, and I was going in expecting to be a schlocky popcorn for the mind. It was not. If you have not read this manga, do so.
I agree. I think this was a very good way to close the door on SC for the podcast. And more importantly, what I'm really happy about is that we read this and then we can come and talk about it. You made me see things that I hadn't thought about, and I'm sure the same vice versa. And we've done this with the novels, right? The novels are fun. They're not literary masterpieces. There's not a whole lot of deeper meaning you can read into them. So mostly we're talking about different facets, what we liked, what we didn't like, any kind of connections we can draw between that and the games. With this, we could actually talk about literary stuff, which is fun. It's invigorating.
Vice versa, don't you mean Weissman?
All right, pull us out, Kevin.
I'm Kevin. That's Colin. See you next time when we talk about Trails the Third Prologue.
Thanks for listening, everybody. Bye-bye.